Project Power is basically a superhero action film. And I didn't know this going into it. And I didn't even realize it during the movie, but apparently it's rated R, which I guess makes sense because there's some stuff that happens. It's very
People
gross and very
explode.
over the top. Yeah, people explode. There's gory stuff. But I guess the reason I thought it was kind of going for PG-13 is because they sort of avoid F-bombs and there's some
Yeah, no,
PG-13 tropes in here, which I
no,
thought
I
was kind
get
of
you,
strange.
man. Because there's one scene where like Jamie Foxx like it's about to say the F word and he doesn't, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh, this might be PG-13. He's like, wait a minute, a guy just exploded like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
there's no way this is PG or trying to be
Right, right.
PG-13.
That's probably confusing because we haven't explained the premise of the film yet. So this just hit Netflix, and the original script was a bit of a bidding war. A lot of studios wanted to make this, and the reason is because the premise is pretty promising. The idea is that a pharmaceutical sort of corporation has created a drug or a pill that gives you superpowers for 5 minutes. The catch is that you don't know what your power is. So every person has a different power. And there is a chance that if you take this pill, you will explode, as we have laid out here. And the movie itself follows a drug dealer played by kind of a newcomer actor who I'm not as aware of, Dominique Fishback. I think we've seen her maybe one or two other things. And then she is kind of a drug dealer who is working in tandem with a police detective played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and their worlds collide with a former soldier, the Major, played by Jamie Foxx, who is hunting down the people who distribute this pill because of something related to a bit of a complicated backstory, but definitely not a backstory that I thought was all that interesting. It was weird because you get to this point in the film where you're finding out this is why all of these characters are here. They're united by these cool powers. And really, what it comes down to is the thing that our central character wants is very rote. It's very tropey. There's nothing much to it. I think that some of the subplots in here are a little interesting. I think the idea of Joseph Gordon-Levitt as this cop who has to sort of secretly use the pill in order to compete with criminals who are using this pill, but he has to do it secretly. There's an interesting vein of a story there. I think Dominique Fishback, it's a lot of good scenes, and she doesn't end up being kind of just like the annoying side character who is there because reasons. She actually has a little bit of agency in this and kind of gives something to the plot without being a distraction more than anything. But I don't know, this film did not really register for me, Will. As an action movie, it has its moments. This comes to us from the directors of Paranormal Activity 3 and Nerve. I saw a lot of Nerve in this, and I saw some horror elements, certainly out of Paranormal Activity 3. There's one scene in particular that did wow me. Like, genuinely, I thought was a standout scene that, in a better movie would have made the movie. But other than that, Project Power was a huge letdown for me. It didn't have a lot of power for me. But what did you think of the movie, Will?
I'm a little more mixed on it, I guess. Like I do recognize some of the good that's in here. Like I like you were saying, I think the premise itself is intriguing enough that I was kind of willing to forgive some of the like tropey things you were saying and some of the like clunky writing, which is very apparent throughout the film, but not enough to where like I can really cut it some slack. Because like you said, it does follow such a rote formula as far as these things are concerned. Like the R-rated elements does give it a little bit more spice, but the story itself doesn't really go in any direction that you wouldn't expect it to, which is a shame because I do think if this story or the script was taken from this writer, I'm not as familiar with who they are, but if maybe like another writer just like kind of fleshed it out and kind of really dug more into like the metaphor here or like maybe the allegory, or like something that like made it a little bit more meaningful as it stands, like the intent of the film seems kind of like messy at times. Like I get what's like, I think I get what it's trying to do, but I don't really think the execution really makes it clear enough to where like it really affects it or really makes it effective. I mean, but as a film, like, I mean, visually it's more striking than a lot of the recent Netflix blockbusters. Like I think this is a little bit more visually appealing than something like The Old Guard or Bright. In some respects, some of the scenes look kind of like overwashed out and kind of ugly, but some of them are very like, kinetic and fun. So I was kind of back and forth in the visual style. But I mean, the performances, I do really like Dominique Fishback. I saw her in The Night Comes to Us, I think it's called, or so. It was an indie film from about 3 or 4 years ago, I think, and she was the lead in it. She was really good in it, and I'm glad that she got us this platform. I think she does a really good job here. I think Jamie Foxx is a lot of fun. Joseph Gordon-Levitt's fine. He seems a little miscast, but I get he's trying to do kind of like the Robin thing again. So
Yeah,
it's
a little
not,
bit.
yeah, it's not bad. Just I'm like, I don't know. I feel like like I never really fully bought him in this character. Maybe it's that baby face. I don't know what it is. But as a film, yeah, I agree with a lot of your criticisms. I think I'm a little bit more forgiving of the film because I do like Henry Jose and Ariel Schulman. I think with the exception of Paranormal Activity 4, I've really enjoyed a lot of their stuff. And I do think they have a fun visual style, and I think they have a playfulness to their filmmaking that's generally enjoyable, especially for something like this. But there is something about this film in particular that's really kind of like overly serious and overly moody in a way that like kind of prevents it from having as much fun as the premise suggests. Because like the idea of like, you know, like these characters can have these powers that you know, can change at a whim and could be very deadly and stuff like it could be a lot more cartoony, a lot more like silly than I think it could be. And so like the kind of more serious approach kind of like makes it seem silly in a bad way, I feel like, because it's kind of going for something that's a little bit more grounded in its approach. So I don't know, I'm back and forth on it. There's stuff in here I like and there's a lot of stuff I don't. So I don't know, I'll figure it out where I stand as we talk.
Yeah, I think even with that serious tone, I think for me it's more noticeable that they do have this really intriguing premise and they have all of these amazing directions they can go into with these powers and everything. But ultimately, we don't see a lot of different powers, and most of them are just not very interesting. There's one, for example, where one of the characters kind of turns into a bad CGI troll from like the Harry Potter movies, and it's really out of place, I thought. And it, you know, the whole culmination of that scene is super underwhelming. Yeah, it's an $85 million budget. So we're definitely not looking at a film with like the massive Disney budget you would get for a big superhero film.
But it has a like TV pilot feel to it a lot. Maybe it's because of Netflix thing, but I got that sense a lot watching this. Agreed.
Speaking of TV, yeah, you mentioned Dominique Fishback. I think film-wise, I've seen her in like The Hate U Give is probably the only other thing I've seen her in movie-wise. But she's been in a bunch of shows. I mean, she's had like smaller roles and certain episodes. The only show I think she's been like a serious regular was The Deuce on HBO. But yeah, other than that, she is relative newcomer when it comes to film. And then also Mason Tomlin, who did the screenplay you kind of briefly mentioned. I didn't know this screenwriter very well because he's actually working on the new Batman movie with Matt Reeves. So I'm very curious about how this is going to kind of like, you know, inform, like if this film is successful or if it's not successful, if that is going to inform how people receive the Batman, or if people are going to forget this movie and be like, oh, the screenwriter of Project Power, okay, or if they're going to be like, oh, no wonder, you know, if the film ends up not being good, you know, being like, well, Project Power wasn't good, if that's their opinion, right? So but yeah, this is more of an up and coming screenwriter. He's only been around for a few years now. That said, I agree with you a lot of your criticisms. I'm a little, I want to say one nice thing, specifically the body horror stuff is at least sort of doing something different with the superhero thing. Yeah. I like the idea of like the superhero body horror and really
I always love body horror.
Like it's a good idea to infuse that, and like these superpowers are extremely dangerous and it plays into the metaphor pretty well. There are some scenes here that I was like, oh my goodness, of course this is rated R. Even though like the rest of the movie didn't quite match that. There's a particular action scene where we are literally watching somebody's body break down in kind of a one shot, where a fight is being observed beyond the glass. And even though the point of this scene, or like the horrendous violence of this scene, is never paid off in any meaningful way, like there's never a moment where you can think back to that scene and be like, this scene had to happen because it informs this character motivation or decision that happens later. No, it's just kind of like a flashy scene that happens that is very well produced, that you get the sense that it's Netflix trying to insert maybe their own Daredevil hallway fight scene to sort of get attention. And it comes across that way. It doesn't mean the scene is any less exciting. And I think that it is easily the best one of the movie. And I was surprised that none of the rest of the movies seemed to match up in terms of quality for me.
It's kind of the same issues that Chris Hemsworth Netflix action movie from like a few months ago that I can't even remember the title. Yeah, there you go. Which I think this movie's better than that, but that had a similar issue. Yeah, I just remembered it's Night Comes On is the Dominique Fishback movie I was referring to. Also, did you know she's 29? I had no idea.
No, that is a huge surprise to me. I thought she was maybe in her early 20s. Wow.
Yeah, no, I didn't even think she was even in her 20s. So surprised to me. I mean,
she plays a high schooler in this movie.
Right. Yeah, I mean, she's older than me. You know, I'm just more surprised. I'm not trying to play her a spot or anything. I think she's a great actress.
She's my age. So
yeah. Wow. Anyway, I mean, unless Google's wrong on that. But in any case, yeah, I don't think this is a bad film. I think it's fine. I just think it's not really going to sit with me too long. Like I think it's another one of these Netflix action movies that it's I think a little bit better than some of the ones we've gotten recently, but ultimately I just feel it to be kind of middling in its approach. I mean, like I said before, I do like Jamie Foxx. I think he is a like legit star, and I think he has a lot of charisma, and I think he does bring a little bit more to this role than what's written on the page. And I enjoyed his performance in this. I thought he did a good job, and I think he works well with Dominique Fishback. But yeah, in the end, I just was kind of left wanting, I guess, a little bit more than what I got. But at the same time, like I don't think it's a particularly terrible film either. So I'm
Sure,
somewhere in between.
it's mostly competent, even though it doesn't really amount to much, at least by my estimation. I'd
Right.
say that I definitely agree. This is slightly better than a lot of other Netflix action movies we've gotten, even though it doesn't have the best action. It at least is a bit more of a solid script. It's not
A little
as
bit more inventive.
nonsensical.
Yeah.
I think what it's missing is just some more surprises. I think more of the surprises we get are all sort of built into the backstory of the major character, which are all sort of revealed in the midpoint. There was at no point in this movie where I was like, that's an interesting subversion, or that's not what I was expecting. You kind of said that it really just sort of plays out the way you think it will. And I had the same sort of feeling where Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, he's kind of playing into how New Orleans, this is our location, and they really capitalize on New Orleans as a place instead of it just being like a backdrop like it is in another Netflix movie like The Lovebirds. It actually plays into the story of like the people of this city feel like lab rats. They feel like their lives don't matter, and they actually mention Hurricane Katrina implicitly a few times, and playing into like the resentment they have toward the government. There's a movie right there, and this movie just barely touches on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's like, it's kind of like that same issue I had, and this is going to be a comparison, it might seem worse than it actually is, but like Fan Four Stick, like there's that scene in the middle where like they kind of like explore like the humanity of it, and like the idea of like having superpowers is like a terrifying thing. And it's like, it's like a really, like, especially in this like superhero boom, like that's a really interesting idea for a body horror film. And like this movie kind of touches on that as well. Like you kind of like see like the idea of like, when they have superpowers, like it has like damaging effects, like Machine Gun Kelly, like his body's burned. Like he's not like he's like Johnny Storm or whatever. But like these are like interesting ideas. I just don't think the script is smart enough to really communicate them in a way that's as effective as the concept is, which is disappointing.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of when movies like this sort of degloss or deglamorize the superhero genre. I think we're definitely overdue for that when it comes to a bigger budget, more mainstream offering, because we've gotten it plenty of other times in not lesser films, but smaller films, I should say.
And like TV and stuff like The Boys and things.
Yeah. The Boys, still working through season 2, which is coming out pretty soon. And I cannot recommend The Boys enough. I know, Will, you are sort of soured on it because you accidentally watched the season 1 finale instead of the pilot. I still don't know how that happened, but
I have my ways.
If you can get back through it, Will, it's really rewarding, and that is a much better alternative watch for any listeners who have not seen The Boys or are ready to watch season 2. That's going to be coming out soon, but it's such a fantastic exploration of the superhero genre through the lens of the people without powers, which is an idea that other things have tried. Like we've gotten like Powerless, and there was that one show where it was like kind of like Wayne Enterprises employees, and like people have tried to explore this premise kind of before, and it tends to have mixed results at best. One thing that is coming out in a couple of weeks that could sort of lean into the sort of superhero body horror shtick, we should say, is New Mutants, which is supposed to be like a horror super kind of thing. Yeah. And I wonder how this is going to compare. They're sort of releasing around the same time. I think New Mutants is probably going to be an unforgettable experience for us. Yeah, one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, well, I say supposedly because who knows? Like, that's one of those movies that I'll see it when I believe it. Yeah, well, Curse. Yeah, that too. Yeah. But yeah.
Yes. It reminds me of like Solo, a Star Wars story, where I fully expect, even when like I press play, or if I was at a theater, someone's just going to come out and say this movie never existed. So,
like you've been here for 100 years.
Yes, waiting for a movie that will never begin.
Yeah,
that's Project Power. Not much to talk about beyond all of that. I'm just a C on it. I think it's it's okay. It's a little less than okay in some cases, but there's enough in it that's good that I can't say it's a fully bad film to any extent. It is just totally serviceable. It exists. It's not very offensive to watch in the sense that you probably won't feel dumber having watched it. But, you know, it's a bare distraction at best.
Yeah, I mean, like if I was giving this out of like a 10, I'd say maybe it's like a 5.8 or 5.9. Like it's like almost there, I feel like
Almost
it's almost
a C plus.
well, no, that'd be almost like a B minus because that to me is like about a C plus.
Got it.
I think that's the thing. It's like a C plus verging on a B minus. It's one of those things where it's like it's almost passable. It's like almost there for me. I just think it's like missing one or two things that could really make this unique enough or to stand out enough to where like I'll remember it in a week or two. As it stands, I think it just kind of ends up being somewhat serviceable. Kind of just does what it needs to do, I guess, but it doesn't really make an impression, which given the premise itself, which I think is, like you said, really interesting and really intriguing idea and with a lot of resonant themes, I think this movie just falls short in a lot of ways, which is a shame because like there's stuff here I like. I do like the two central performances. I do like the concept. I do think Henry Jose and Ariel Schulman are talented filmmakers who tend to do good things. But yeah, this one just didn't fully connect with me. I liked it a little bit more than you did. I got a little bit more out of this than I did The Old Guard, even though I'm kind of similar on this. But yeah, I think a high C plus is where I ultimately land on it.
I definitely prefer The Old Guard. I think that's a stronger film overall.
I think this is more visually interesting, at least to me, than Old Guard.
In some ways, sure. But I think that the story of it and some of the action set pieces, I think, are a bit stronger in Old Guard overall, minus the one scene we mentioned. I'll say that in both cases, Old Guard and Project Power, I have decent expectations for the follow-up. I think that they could be very good, could have a lot of potential, but we'll have to wait and see on both of those films. I know Old Guard is for sure getting a sequel. Yeah. We'll see about Project Power. It was a high budget kind of film. Depending on how many eyeballs it gets, I'm not sure if they'll be able to make another one, but they certainly could if they deem so.
Movies are pilots now.
Yes, that is kind of the case.